Daniel Cross never imagined that a small crescent-shaped birthmark would unlock a 25-year-old mystery and shatter everything he thought he knew about his past. But on a humid August afternoon in Boston, as he stood guard outside a conference room, he caught a glimpse of something on his new client's wrist that made his blood run cold. A mark identical to the one he'd spent 2.5 decades trying to forget. Before we begin the story, comment below with the city you're watching from. Enjoy the story, everyone. Daniel Cross was 47 years old, and he'd been in private security for the better part of 2 decades. After leaving the army at 28, he'd drifted through various jobs: construction, warehouse work, even a brief stint as a truck driver, before finding his calling in executive protection. He was good at it, reliable, professional, invisible when he needed to be. He didn't ask questions, didn't get involved in his clients' personal lives, and certainly didn't let emotions interfere with his work. That detachment had served him well. It had also kept him alone. The call from Sterling Security came on a Tuesday morning in late July. His supervisor, a no-nonsense woman named Patricia, got straight to the point. "We need someone for a long-term assignment, 6 months minimum, possibly longer. The client is Sophia Winters. You know who she is?" Daniel did. Sophia Winters was the 30-year-old CEO of Winters Tech, a software and cybersecurity company that had exploded in value over the past 5 years. She was worth an estimated $3 billion, had been featured on the cover of Forbes twice, and was known for her ruthless business acumen and her intensely private personal life. "What's the threat level?" Daniel asked. "Corporate espionage, mostly." "She's in the middle of a massive merger with a European tech firm, and there have been some concerning incidents. Someone hacked her personal email. There was a break-in at her home. Nothing taken, but it was clearly a message. The board wants her protected until the deal closes." "And she agreed to have security?" Patricia laughed dryly. "Not happily. She's apparently very particular about her privacy. Try not to crowd her too much, but don't let her out of your sight either. She's brilliant but stubborn as hell." Daniel met Sophia Winters for the first time the following Monday at her office in downtown Boston. The building was sleek and modern, all glass and steel, reflecting the summer sun like a beacon. He was escorted to the executive floor by an assistant who seemed harried and exhausted. "Ms. Winters is in back-to-back meetings all day," the assistant explained. "She'll meet with you briefly between sessions. And fair warning, she's not thrilled about having a bodyguard. Her words were, 'an expensive shadow I didn't ask for.'" Daniel nodded. He'd dealt with reluctant clients before. When Sophia Winters finally emerged from a conference room 20 minutes later, Daniel's first thought was that she looked younger than her photos suggested. She was tall, maybe 5'9", with dark brown hair pulled into a severe ponytail and sharp, intelligent eyes behind frameless glasses. She wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit and moved with the efficient grace of someone who never wasted a single motion. "Mr. Cross," she said, not offering her hand. "I'm told you're my new shadow. I prefer to think of it as discreet protection, Ms. Winters. Call it what you like. I have 4 more meetings today, a dinner with investors at 7, and a conference call with London at 10 p.m. Keep up or don't, but don't slow me down." She turned and walked back into the conference room without waiting for a response. Daniel followed, positioning himself near the door where he could monitor everyone entering and exiting. Through the glass wall, he watched Sophia command the room with absolute authority, her voice never rising but her presence dominating nonetheless. She was formidable, he thought, and deeply guarded. The first week was exhausting. Sophia kept a punishing schedule, meetings from dawn until late evening, calls at odd hours to accommodate international time zones, working dinners that stretched past midnight. Daniel shadowed her constantly, a silent presence 3 steps behind, always scanning, always alert. She barely acknowledged him. When she did speak to him, it was purely functional, informing him of schedule changes, telling him to wait in the car, occasionally asking him to sweep a room before she entered. There was no small talk, no attempts at pleasantries. She treated him like a piece of equipment, necessary but impersonal. Daniel didn't mind. It made the job simpler. But on Friday of that first week, something changed. They were at a charity gala at the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. Sophia had been cornered by a persistent reporter who kept asking invasive questions about her personal life, why she wasn't married, whether she planned to have children, if she thought women could have it all, or had to sacrifice family for career success. Daniel watched Sophia's jaw tighten with each question, saw the way her fingers curled into fists at her sides. She answered with polite deflections, but her discomfort was evident to anyone paying attention. When the reporter finally moved on, Sophia excused herself and walked quickly toward the restrooms. Daniel followed at a respectful distance. She disappeared inside, and he took up position outside the door. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Daniel was beginning to wonder if he should send someone in to check on her when the door finally opened. Sophia emerged, and Daniel saw that her carefully composed mask had slipped. Her eyes were slightly red, her breathing uneven. She'd been crying, he realized, though she was fighting hard to hide it. "Ms. Winters, are you—" "I'm fine," she cut him off sharply. "Let's go." But as she moved past him, she stumbled slightly, her heel catching on the marble floor. Daniel's hand shot out instinctively, catching her arm to steady her. That's when he saw it. Her sleeve had ridden up slightly, exposing her left wrist. And there, just below her palm, was a small crescent-shaped birthmark, maybe half an inch long, a slightly darker shade than the surrounding skin. Daniel's hand froze. His breath stopped in his chest. He knew that mark. He'd seen it before, 25 years ago, on impossibly tiny skin, in a hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and heartbreak. "Mr. Cross." Sophia's voice seemed to come from very far away. "You can let go of my arm now." Daniel released her immediately, stepping back, his mind reeling. It couldn't be. It was impossible. But that mark. "Are you all right?" Sophia was studying him now, concern replacing her usual irritation. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine," Daniel managed, though his voice sounded strange to his own ears. "Sorry. Thought I saw someone suspicious." It was a weak excuse, but Sophia accepted it with a nod. They left the gala shortly after, and Daniel spent the entire car ride back to her apartment in stunned silence, staring at the back of her head and trying to process what he'd seen. That night, in his small apartment in Dorchester, Daniel pulled out a box he kept hidden in the back of his closet. He hadn't opened it in years. Inside were memories he'd tried to bury, photos, letters, and a single hospital bracelet, and a photograph. Faded now, the colors slightly washed out, but still clear enough. A baby, maybe 2 days old, wrapped in a pink blanket, and on her tiny wrist, visible in the photo, a small crescent-shaped birthmark. Daniel's hands shook as he held the photo. 25 years ago, he'd been 22 years old, barely more than a kid himself. He'd been with his girlfriend, Emma, for 2 years. They'd been in love, or what he'd thought was love at that age. Young, reckless, full of plans that meant nothing in the face of reality. When Emma got pregnant, they'd both been terrified. They had no money, no prospects. Daniel was working construction, barely making rent on a studio apartment. Emma was in her 2nd year of community college, trying to get a nursing degree. They'd talked about abortion, about adoption, about somehow finding a way to keep the baby. In the end, they'd decided to keep her. They'd named her Grace. Daniel had been there for the birth. He'd held his daughter, memorized every detail of her tiny face, that distinctive birthmark on her wrist. He'd loved her with a fierce, protective intensity that had shocked him. But 3 days later, everything fell apart. Emma's family had never approved of Daniel. They thought he was a deadbeat, a loser who would drag Emma down. When Emma's mother showed up at the hospital, she'd brought lawyers. Within a week, Emma had disappeared, taking the baby. Daniel had tried to find them, spent months searching, but Emma's family had money and connections. They'd covered their tracks well. Eventually, Daniel's own mother had sat him down and told him the brutal truth. Emma's family had paid her off. $50,000 to sign away his parental rights, to agree to a closed adoption, to never contact Emma or the baby again. His mother had taken the money. She'd forged his signature on the documents. By the time Daniel found out, it was too late. Grace was gone. Adopted by some wealthy family his mother wouldn't name. Emma had cut off all contact. And Daniel had been left with nothing but a few photos and a grief so deep it had taken him years to climb out of. Now, staring at that photograph, at that distinctive crescent-shaped birthmark, Daniel felt like the ground was shifting beneath him. Sophia Winters was 30 years old. She would have been born in 1993, the same year as Grace. She was from Boston, though her public biography was vague about her early childhood. And she had that mark. It could be a coincidence. Birthmarks weren't unique. But the shape, the location, the timing, it all fit too perfectly. Daniel didn't sleep that night. He lay awake, mind racing, trying to figure out what to do with this information. Should he confront Sophia? Should he investigate quietly? Should he walk away from the job entirely? By morning, he'd decided to do nothing. Not yet. He needed to be sure before he did anything that could upend both their lives. But watching Sophia became different after that. Daniel found himself studying her, looking for traces of Emma in her features, trying to see himself in the shape of her eyes or the line of her jaw. He noticed things he'd missed before, the way she bit her lower lip when she was thinking, a gesture Emma used to make, the way she rubbed her left wrist when she was stressed, as if the birthmark was a source of comfort, and her isolation. That hit him hardest. Sophia had no family in her life, at least none that Daniel could see. No parents at events, no siblings mentioned in interviews. In all the weeks he'd been protecting her, not a single family member had called or visited. She was alone. Just like he'd been alone for 25 years. 2 weeks after the gala, Daniel finally worked up the courage to probe gently. They were in the car, heading to a meeting, and Sophia was reviewing documents on her tablet. Daniel, sitting in the front passenger seat while her driver navigated Boston traffic, broke the silence. "Miss Winters, I need to ask you something." Sophia looked up, surprise flickering across her face. He rarely initiated conversation. "What is it?" "Your family. Do they live in Boston? I ask because I need to know if there are any locations or people I should be monitoring for security purposes." Something shuttered in Sophia's expression. "I don't have family," she said flatly. "Not in any meaningful sense." "No one?" "My adoptive parents died in a car accident when I was 12. I went into foster care after that. No siblings, no grandparents, no one." The words landed like physical blows. Adoptive parents, foster care, alone since 12. "I'm sorry," Daniel said quietly. Sophia shrugged, but he could see the tension in her shoulders. It was a long time ago. "I learned early that the only person you can rely on is yourself." She went back to her tablet, clearly considering the conversation over. But Daniel's mind was reeling. If Sophia was Grace, and he was becoming increasingly certain she was, then something had gone horribly wrong. The adoption was supposed to give her a better life, a stable family, opportunities he couldn't provide. Instead, she'd lost everyone and ended up alone. That night, Daniel did something he'd sworn he'd never do. He used his security clearances to run a background check on Sophia Winters. It was a violation of privacy, potentially illegal, but he had to know. The information came back in fragments. Sophia had been born in Boston in August 1993. Her original name was sealed in adoption records, but the timing matched perfectly with Grace's birthday. Her adoptive parents, Michael and Carol Winters, had been wealthy. He was a surgeon, she was a lawyer. They'd adopted Sophia when she was 3 days old. When Sophia was 12, her adoptive parents had died in a car accident on Route 2, just outside of Boston. With no other family, Sophia had entered the foster care system. The record showed she'd been in 4 different homes over the next 6 years, until she aged out at 18. Despite all that, she'd excelled. She'd gotten a full scholarship to MIT, graduated top of her class with degrees in computer science and business. By 25, she'd founded Winters Tech. By 30, she was a billionaire. She'd survived everything life had thrown at her and built an empire from nothing, just like Daniel had survived his own losses and rebuilt his life. The realization that she was his daughter, his grace, became a certainty in his mind. But with that certainty came a paralyzing question. What the hell was he supposed to do now? Another week passed. Daniel continued his work, continued watching Sophia, continued wrestling with the knowledge he couldn't share. The not knowing was eating at him, but the thought of telling her terrified him more. What if she didn't believe him? What if she did believe him and hated him for abandoning her? What if knowing the truth made her life worse instead of better? But fate, as it often does, made the decision for him. It happened during what should have been a routine evening. Sophia was working late at the office as usual. Daniel was stationed outside her executive suite, scrolling through security camera feeds on his phone, when he heard raised voices from inside. He was at the door immediately, hand on his weapon, but what he heard stopped him cold. "Don't care what you think you know," Sophia's voice, tight with anger. "My personal life is not up for discussion. Ms. Winters, I'm simply suggesting that before you sign any merger documents, you should be aware of what I've discovered." A man's voice, smooth and oily. Daniel recognized it. Lawrence Hart, one of the board members who'd been opposing the merger. "Your birth records are interesting, as is the trail of money that changed hands around your adoption." "Get out," Sophia said, her voice like ice. "Get out of my office right now." "I'm trying to help you," Hart continued, "but if you won't listen to reason about the merger, perhaps these documents will find their way to certain journalists. I'm sure they'd be fascinated by the story of how Sophia Winters came to be." The threat was clear. Daniel didn't hesitate. He opened the door and stepped inside. "Mr. Hart," Daniel said calmly, though every muscle in his body was coiled tight. "Ms. Winters asked you to leave. I'd suggest you do so. Now." Hart turned, his face flushed with anger and alcohol. Daniel could smell it from across the room. "This doesn't concern you, Rent-A-Cop. Everything concerning Ms. Winters' safety concerns me. You're leaving, or I'm removing you. Your choice." For a moment, Hart looked like he might argue, but something in Daniel's expression made him reconsider. He gathered his briefcase with exaggerated dignity and stalked toward the door. "Think about what I said, Sophia," he called back. "Those documents are very revealing." When the door closed behind him, Daniel turned to find Sophia standing behind her desk, her face pale, hands shaking. "Are you all right?" Daniel asked. "Fine," she said automatically, but her voice cracked on the word. She sat down heavily in her chair, and Daniel saw tears beginning to track down her face. "I'm fine. I just—" And then she broke, really broke, in a way Daniel had never seen. Sobs shook her shoulders and she buried her face in her hands. Daniel moved without thinking, coming around the desk to crouch beside her chair. "Ms. Winters, Sophia, what did he say to you? What documents?" "He—" Sophia couldn't get the words out through her tears. "He found records about my adoption, about money that was paid. He said my biological father sold me, that he took money to sign away his rights and never looked back." The words hit Daniel like bullets. His worst fear confirmed, not only that Sophia was his daughter, but that she believed the lie his mother had crafted, the fiction that he'd chosen money over her. "Sophia," Daniel said, his voice rough with emotion he couldn't contain anymore. "Sophia, listen to me. That's not true. Your father didn't sell you. He didn't know what was happening." Sophia looked up at him, confusion cutting through her tears. "What are you talking about? How would you know?" Daniel made his decision. He reached for his wallet, pulled out the old photograph he'd been carrying for the past 3 weeks, ever since he'd seen her birthmark. The photo of a tiny baby with a crescent-shaped mark on her wrist. He held it out to Sophia with a shaking hand. "Because I'm him," Daniel said, his voice breaking. "I'm your father, Sophia. And I didn't sell you. I didn't abandon you. I've been looking for you for 25 years. Sophia stared at the photograph, then at Daniel, then back at the photograph. The silence stretched out, broken only by her ragged breathing. "That's not possible," she finally whispered. "Your birthmark," Daniel said. "The crescent on your left wrist. I saw it 3 weeks ago at the gala. That's when I started to suspect. I've been carrying that photo ever since, trying to figure out what to do, how to tell you." "No," Sophia stood up abruptly, backing away from him. "No, this is insane. You're my bodyguard. This is some kind of game, or a trick, or—" "It's not a trick. Your birthday is August 14th, 1993. You were born at Boston General Hospital at 3:47 in the morning. Your mother's name was Emma Rodriguez, and I held you, Sophia. I held you for 3 days before you were taken away from me." Sophia's legs seemed to give out. She sank back into her chair, her face completely drained of color. "Emma Rodriguez," she repeated numbly. "That was in the documents Hart showed me. The birth mother's name." "I was 22, Daniel continued, the words pouring out now that he'd started. "Your mother and I, we were kids really. We had nothing. When she got pregnant, we were terrified, but we wanted to keep you. We named you Grace." "Grace," Sophia whispered, and something in her expression cracked. "But Emma's family had money, and they had lawyers. 3 days after you were born, they took you. Emma disappeared. I think they sent her away somewhere, maybe to Europe. I never found out. And my mother—" Daniel's voice broke. "My mother took money from them, $50,000 to sign papers saying I gave up my rights. She forged my signature. By the time I found out what she'd done, you were already gone, adopted, and the records were sealed." He took a shaky breath. "I tried to find you. For years I tried. But I had nothing, no money, no connections, no way to track you through the system. Eventually, I had to accept that you were gone forever, that I'd never know what happened to you." Sophia was crying again, silent tears streaming down her face. "Why didn't you try harder? Why didn't you fight more?" "I did fight!" Daniel's own tears were falling now, years of grief and guilt pouring out. "I fought until I had nothing left. But I was nobody, Sophia. A poor kid from Dorchester with a construction job. Your adoptive parents were wealthy, connected. The system protected them, not me. And part of me," his voice cracked, "part of me believed that maybe you were better off, that maybe a rich family could give you everything I couldn't. They died," Sophia said flatly, "when I was 12. And then I spent 6 years being passed around foster homes because no one wanted a traumatized teenager who was too smart for her own good. I had no one. I've had no one for 18 years. The words destroyed Daniel. All his justifications, all his grief. None of it mattered in the face of what his daughter had endured. "I'm so sorry," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Sophia, I'm so sorry. If I had known, if there had been any way to find you—" "But you didn't know," Sophia said, and there was no accusation in her voice, only exhaustion. "And I didn't know you existed. I thought, all these years, I thought I'd been abandoned by parents who didn't want me, that I was a mistake they were paid to forget." She looked at the photograph again, still clutched in her hand. A tiny baby with her distinctive birthmark, evidence of a father who'd held her, named her, loved her. "I don't know what to do with this," Sophia said softly. "I don't know how to process this." "Neither do I," Daniel admitted. "I've had 3 weeks to sit with it, and I still don't know. I wasn't planning to tell you. I was terrified of what it would do to you, to your life. But when Hart threatened you with those lies, I couldn't let you believe that you weren't wanted. You were wanted, Sophia. You were loved. You always were." They sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of 25 years of separation hanging between them. "I need time," Sophia finally said. "I need to think about this, process it. I can't just—" She gestured helplessly between them. "I can't just accept that my bodyguard is actually my biological father and everything's fine now." "I know," Daniel said. "Take whatever time you need. I'll—" I can resign from the security detail, if you want. Make this less complicated. No, Sophia said quickly. Don't, not yet. Just give me some time to wrap my head around this. Daniel nodded and stood up to leave. But as he reached the door, Sophia's voice stopped him. Daniel. He turned back. Did you… She hesitated, then pushed forward. Did you really name me Grace? We did, Daniel said softly. Emma wanted to name you after her grandmother, but I liked Grace. We argued about it for weeks. Eventually decided we'd use both names, Grace Eleanor. Though I guess your adoptive parents had different ideas. Sophia, Grace, nodded slowly, processing this information. Thank you, she said quietly, for telling me, for not letting me believe the lie. Always, Daniel said. I spent 25 years not being able to protect you. I won't fail you again. The next few weeks were strange and painful for both of them. Daniel continued his security work, but everything had changed. Sophia was distant, processing, clearly struggling with the revelation that had upended her understanding of her own history. Daniel watched her wrestle with it and felt powerless to help. What could he say? How could he bridge a 25-year gap? But slowly, tentatively, Sophia started asking questions. Little ones at first. What was Emma like? What had Daniel been like at 22? Then bigger ones. Why had Emma's family been so against him? What had happened to his mother after she took the money? Daniel answered everything honestly, even when the truth was ugly. His mother had died of cancer 10 years ago, never having apologized for what she'd done. Emma had disappeared completely. Daniel had tried to find her over the years but had come up with nothing. His own life had been a series of false starts and failures until he'd found security work and finally felt like he had a purpose. I'm not proud of who I was back then, Daniel admitted during one late-night conversation in Sophia's office. I was angry and lost for a long time. It took me years to get my life together. But you did get it together, Sophia pointed out. You could have given up, become bitter. Instead, you do work that matters. You protect people. I protect people because I couldn't protect you, Daniel said quietly. Every client I've ever had, some part of me has been trying to make up for failing you. Sophia was quiet for a moment. You didn't fail me, Daniel. The system failed both of us. It was the first time she'd called him by his first name without the Mr. Cross formality. It felt significant. As the weeks turned into months, their relationship slowly shifted. Sophia started inviting Daniel to stay after his shift ended, to talk, or sometimes just to sit in comfortable silence while she worked. They had dinner together sometimes, nothing fancy, just takeout in her office or at her apartment. Daniel learned that his daughter was brilliant, but lonely, driven but achingly isolated. She'd built walls around herself after years of being disappointed by the people who were supposed to care for her. Trusting him didn't come easily. But bit by bit, those walls started to come down. One evening, about 4 months after the truth had come out, Sophia showed Daniel something she'd never shown anyone. A small box she kept locked in her desk drawer. Inside were remnants of her childhood, photos of her adoptive parents, report cards, a medal from a science fair, and at the bottom, a tiny hospital bracelet. I found this when I was going through my parents' papers after they died, Sophia explained. It's from when I was born. It has my original name on it, Grace Elena Rodriguez. Daniel looked at the bracelet, his vision blurring with tears. You kept it. I didn't know why for a long time. I thought maybe it was just sentiment. But I think part of me always wanted to know who Grace Elena was, who she was supposed to be. She was supposed to be loved, Daniel said firmly. And she is. She always has been. Sophia's eyes were wet. I spent so many years thinking I was alone, that no one in the world cared if I lived or died. And now you're here, and you're telling me that someone has been grieving me for 25 years. I don't know how to reconcile those two realities. You don't have to reconcile them tonight, Daniel said. We have time now, all the time in the world. The merger Sophia had been working on finally closed successfully. Lawrence Hart, the board member who tried to blackmail her, was quietly removed from his position after the company's lawyers found evidence of his attempts at extortion. The documents he'd threatened to leak never materialized. With the merger complete and the immediate security threats resolved, Daniel's contract was technically over. But when Patricia called to ask about his next assignment, Daniel hesitated. "I'd like to request an extension," he said. "If Ms. Winters is willing to keep me on." "She already called," Patricia said, and Daniel could hear the smile in her voice. "She requested you specifically for an indefinite period, said you were the only security she trusted." Daniel felt warmth spread through his chest. Trust. From Sophia. From Grace. That word meant everything. 6 months after the revelation, Sophia asked Daniel to have dinner with her. Not takeout in the office, but an actual dinner at a nice restaurant. Daniel arrived in the only suit he owned, nervous in a way he hadn't been since he was a teenager. Sophia was waiting at a quiet table in the back, wearing a simple dark dress instead of her usual business attire. She smiled when she saw him, a real smile, warm and genuine. "You look terrified," she observed as he sat down. "I am terrified," Daniel admitted. "I've never had dinner with my daughter before, at least not since she was 3 days old." Sophia's smile softened. "I've never had dinner with my father before either, so we're even." They ordered food and talked, really talked, about everything and nothing. Sophia told stories from MIT, from the early days of her company. Daniel shared memories from his army days, from the years he'd spent searching for her. As the evening wore on, Sophia grew more serious. "I want to ask you something," she said. "And I need you to be honest with me. Always. Do you—" She hesitated, then pushed forward. "Do you want to be my father? Not just my bodyguard, not just someone from my past. Do you want an actual relationship? Because I've been thinking about it, and I think I want that. But I need to know if you do too." Daniel's throat tightened with emotion. "Sophia, Grace, I've wanted nothing else for 25 years. But I don't want to pressure you. I know this is complicated, and I know I can't just step in and pretend the last 2.5 decades didn't happen." "I don't want you to pretend anything," Sophia said. "I want us to build something real, starting from where we are now. I've spent my whole life alone, Daniel. I don't want to be alone anymore." "Neither do I," Daniel said, his voice rough. "And for the record, you've never been alone. Even when I didn't know where you were, even when I thought I'd never find you, you were always in my heart. Always." Sophia reached across the table and took his hand. It was the first time she'd initiated physical contact since learning the truth. "Thank you," she said softly, "for never giving up, for finding me, even if it took 25 years. I'd have searched for 50 if I had to," Daniel replied. "You're my daughter. You always will be." Over the following year, they built something neither of them had thought possible, a family. Not the family that should have existed 25 years ago, but the family they created together now. Sophia insisted Daniel move out of his small apartment in Dorchester. She bought him a condo near her building, furnished it, and visited regularly. They had standing dinner plans every Sunday, a tradition Sophia had read about and wanted to try. Daniel taught Sophia things her adoptive parents had never gotten the chance to: how to change a tire, how to throw a punch for self-defense, how to make his mother's arroz con pollo recipe, the one good thing she'd taught him. Sophia introduced Daniel to her world: tech conferences, charity galas, board meetings. She made him her permanent head of security with a salary that made him uncomfortable until she pointed out that he'd earned it 1,000 times over. "Besides," she'd said with a smile, "you're family now, and family takes care of each other." The word family became significant between them. Sophia started using it more often, as if testing it out, making sure it was real. And every time she said it, Daniel felt something heal inside him. On Sophia's 31st birthday, Daniel gave her a gift he'd been working on for months. It was a photo album, carefully compiled, telling the story of her first 3 days of life. Photos of newborn Grace, of Emma holding her, of Daniel cradling her tiny body. Hospital records, the original birth certificate, Even a video he'd had transferred from an old camcorder, blurry footage of him changing her diaper for the first time, laughing at his own incompetence. "I wanted you to know that you were wanted," Daniel explained, as Sophia paged through the album with tears streaming down her face. "That even though it was only 3 days, you were so loved. You are so loved." Sophia closed the album and pulled Daniel into a hug, a real one, tight and long, the kind of hug that said everything words couldn't. "I love you too, Dad," she whispered against his shoulder. It was the first time she'd called him that. Dad. Daniel held his daughter and cried, years of grief and loss finally giving way to joy and gratitude. He'd lost 25 years, but he had her now, and he would never let go again. The path to healing wasn't linear. There were setbacks, moments when old wounds reopened without warning. 3 months after the revelation, Sophia had a panic attack during a board meeting. Daniel, waiting outside, heard the commotion and rushed in to find her hyperventilating, her face pale and sweating. He cleared the room immediately, ignoring the protests of confused executives. "I can't breathe," Sophia gasped, clutching her chest. "I can't." "Yes, you can," Daniel said firmly, kneeling beside her chair. "Look at me, Sophia. Look at me and breathe with me. In through your nose, out through your mouth." He demonstrated, maintaining eye contact, his presence solid and unwavering. Slowly, Sophia's breathing synchronized with his. The panic receded. "I'm sorry," she whispered when she could finally speak again. "I don't know what happened." "We were discussing succession planning, and suddenly I was 12 years old again, being told my parents were dead, and I had no one." "You have someone now," Daniel interrupted gently. "You have me, and I'm not going anywhere." Sophia looked at him, really looked at him, and something shifted in her expression. "You promise?" "I promise. I've already lost you once. I won't lose you again." That night, Sophia showed up at Daniel's apartment unannounced. It was past midnight, and she was still in her work clothes, mascara smudged under her eyes. "I couldn't be alone," she admitted at his doorway. "Is that okay? Can I stay here tonight?" Daniel didn't hesitate. "Of course, always." He set her up in his guest room, gave her one of his old army t-shirts to sleep in, and made her chamomile tea the way she liked it. They sat on his small balcony overlooking the city lights, not talking, just existing together in the cool night air. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop," Sophia finally said. "For you to realize this is too much work, that I'm too damaged and disappear like everyone else." "I'm not everyone else," Daniel replied. "And you're not damaged, Sophia. You're strong. You survived things that would have broken most people. I don't feel strong. The strongest people never do." Sophia was quiet for a long moment. Then, in a voice so small Daniel almost didn't hear it, she said, "I used to imagine what it would be like, having a father, someone who would show up at school events or teach me things or just be there. I'd see other kids with their dads and feel this ache in my chest that I couldn't name." Daniel's throat tightened. "I used to imagine what you were like. Every birthday I'd picture you growing up, 7 years old, learning to ride a bike, 13, starting high school, 18, graduating. I'd wonder if you were happy, if you were safe, if whoever adopted you loved you the way you deserved." "They did," Sophia said quietly. "Michael and Carol, my adoptive parents, they loved me. It wasn't their fault they died, and the foster families after, some of them tried. It's not anyone's fault that I ended up alone. That's just how life works sometimes." "It shouldn't work that way," Daniel said fiercely. "You deserved better. You deserved everything." Sophia turned to look at him, and in the dim light from the city below, Daniel saw tears tracking down her face. "I have it now," she whispered. "I have you. That's everything." They sat together until dawn broke over Boston, father and daughter, filling 25 years of silence with the comfort of shared presence. The first Father's Day after the revelation was approaching, and Sophia was anxious about it in a way that made Daniel's heart ache. She called him 3 times in 1 week just to confirm he'd be available for dinner, as if he might somehow forget or make other plans. "I've never done this before," she admitted during one call. "I don't know the protocol. Do I get you a gift? A card? What do people even do for Father's Day?" "Sophia," Daniel said gently, "there's no protocol. We'll figure it out together." But when Father's Day arrived, Daniel discovered that Sophia had been planning something elaborate, despite her protestations of not knowing what to do. She picked him up in the morning. She'd learned to drive but rarely did it herself, preferring her usual driver, and took him to Fenway Park. "I bought us tickets," she explained, looking both proud and nervous, "to a Red Sox game. I did research, and apparently taking your dad to a baseball game is a very traditional Father's Day activity. I've never actually been to a baseball game before, so you'll have to explain the rules to me." Daniel felt his eyes burning with tears. "Sophia, this is perfect." They spent the afternoon at Fenway, and Daniel taught Sophia about baseball, the innings, the positions, the strategy behind the plays. She asked 1,000 questions, took notes on her phone, and bought them both overpriced hot dogs that she declared were surprisingly delicious. In the 7th inning stretch, as they stood with thousands of other fans singing Sweet Caroline, Sophia leaned close to Daniel and said, "Thank you." "For what?" "For being patient with me, for giving me time to learn how to be your daughter. I know I'm not very good at it yet." "You're perfect at it," Daniel said firmly. "There's no right or wrong way to be my daughter. You just are. That's enough." When they got back to Sophia's apartment that evening, she handed him a wrapped box. Inside was a watch, expensive, elegant, but not ostentatious. "Look at the back," Sophia instructed. Daniel turned it over. Engraved on the back were simple words. "To Dad. Time lost, time found. Love. Grace." Daniel couldn't speak. He pulled Sophia into a hug and held her while tears ran down his face into her hair. "I love you," he managed to say. "I love you so much." "I love you too, Dad," Sophia replied, and the word no longer sounded hesitant or experimental. It sounded like home. But there were still ghosts to confront. Chief among them was Emma Rodriguez. Daniel had searched for Emma periodically over the years, but had never found any trace of her after she'd disappeared with the baby. It was as if she'd vanished completely. No social media presence, no public records, no trail to follow. Then, 18 months after the revelation, Daniel received a message through an old email account he'd set up years ago, specifically for anyone who might be searching for him. The email was simple. "Daniel, it's Emma. I know you've been looking for Grace. I need to talk to you, please." It included a phone number. Daniel stared at the email for an hour before he could bring himself to move. Then he called Sophia. "I need to tell you something," he said, when she answered, "and I need you to tell me how you want me to handle it." When he explained about Emma's message, Sophia was silent for so long, Daniel thought the call had dropped. "Sophia, are you there?" "She knew," Sophia finally said, her voice tight with emotion. "All these years she knew where I was, or at least that you were looking, and she never reached out, never tried to find me. Why now?" "I don't know," Daniel admitted, "but I won't contact her if you don't want me to. This is your choice." Another long pause. Then, "I want to know why. Why she left. Why she never came back. I need to understand." Daniel called the number. Emma answered on the second ring. Her voice hit him like a physical blow, older, rougher, but unmistakably her. They agreed to meet at a neutral location, a coffee shop in Cambridge, 3 days later. Sophia insisted on being there. When they arrived, Emma was already seated in a corner booth. Daniel recognized her immediately despite the years. The same dark hair, now streaked with grey. The same delicate features, but worn down by time and what looked like hard living. She stood when she saw them, her eyes immediately locking on Sophia. "Grace," she whispered. "Sophia," Sophia corrected, her voice cold. "My name is Sophia." They sat down, the tension at the table thick enough to cut. Emma's hands shook as she wrapped them around her coffee cup. "I know you have questions," Emma began, "and I know nothing I say will make up for what I did. But I need you to understand. I didn't have a choice." "Everyone has a choice," Sophia said flatly. "Not when your family is threatening to have you committed to a psychiatric facility," Emma shot back, her voice breaking. "Not when they've already hired lawyers to take your baby away and have the power to make you disappear completely." Daniel leaned forward. "What are you talking about?" Emma's story spilled out in fragments. Her family, wealthy, connected, controlling, had been furious when she got pregnant by some nobody from Dorchester. They'd wanted her to have an abortion. When she refused, they'd made a plan. "They told me if I didn't give up the baby and cut ties with you, they'd have me declared mentally unfit," Emma explained, tears streaming down her face. "They had a psychiatrist on retainer who would testify I was a danger to myself and the baby. They'd have taken her anyway and locked me up in some facility where I couldn't fight back." "So you just left?" Daniel asked, his voice harsh. "You disappeared with our daughter and let them force me to sign away my rights." "I didn't know about that until years later," Emma insisted. "I thought you'd agreed to the adoption. My mother told me you'd taken money and wanted nothing to do with Grace. I was devastated, but I believed her. She was very convincing." "And you never thought to check?" Sophia asked, her voice like ice. "You never thought to reach out, to see if it was true?" "I did," Emma said, looking directly at Sophia. "When you were 10 years old, I hired a private investigator to find you. I'd left my family by then, cut them off completely, and I wanted to know if you were okay. That's when I found out about the Winters, that they'd adopted you, that you were loved and cared for. I thought maybe it had worked out for the best." "And when they died?" Sophia demanded. "When I went into foster care at 12, where were you then?" Emma's face crumbled. "I didn't know. I swear to God I didn't know. I'd lost touch with the investigator, and I wasn't in a good place. I'd been struggling with depression, barely keeping my head above water. By the time I got clean and tried to find you again, you were 18 and completely off the grid. I searched for years, but you disappeared into the tech world under a name I didn't know to look for." She looked at Daniel. "I found you instead, started following the cases you worked, the clients you protected. When I saw you'd been assigned to Sophia Winters, I looked her up and..." Her voice broke. "I saw the photos. I recognized her immediately. She has my mother's eyes, and I knew I had to reach out." The silence that followed was crushing. Finally, Sophia spoke. "I don't know what you want from me," she said quietly. "An absolution I can't give. A relationship we'll never have. You made choices, and those choices meant I grew up thinking I was unwanted, that I'd been abandoned by everyone who was supposed to love me." "I know," Emma whispered, "and I'll carry that guilt for the rest of my life. But I want you to know, I loved you. I held you for 3 days, and I loved you with everything I had. Giving you up destroyed me. I've thought about you every single day for 25 years. "That's not enough," Sophia said, standing up. "Thinking about someone doesn't help them when they're alone and scared. Love doesn't mean anything if it doesn't show up." She walked out of the coffee shop without looking back. Daniel hesitated, then said to Emma, "I can't forgive you yet. Maybe not ever. But I'm glad you're alive. I'm glad you're okay. That's all I can offer right now." He left Emma sitting there and followed his daughter outside. 2 years after the revelation, Sophia made Daniel an offer. "I want to legally change my name," she said over their Sunday dinner. "Not all of it. I like Sophia. I've been her for too long to give her up. But I want to add Rodriguez. Sophia Elena Rodriguez Winters." "Elena?" Daniel asked, his voice thick. "It was supposed to be my middle name, right? Grace Elena? I thought I'd honor that. Honor who I was supposed to be." Daniel couldn't speak. He just nodded, overwhelmed. "And I was thinking," Sophia continued, more hesitant now, "that maybe you'd want to change yours too, to Rodriguez Cross, so we'd share a name." Like a real family. We are a real family, Daniel said firmly. But yes, I'd be honored to share your name. The legal paperwork took months to process. During that waiting period, life continued its unpredictable rhythm, bringing both joy and unexpected challenges that would test their newly formed bond in ways neither could have anticipated. 4 months after the Emma confrontation, on a crisp October morning, Daniel noticed something wrong. Sophia had been working longer hours than usual, pushing herself relentlessly to close a deal with a Japanese tech firm. She looked pale during their morning briefing, and twice he caught her steadying herself against the wall. "You need to see a doctor," Daniel insisted as they rode the elevator to her office. "I'm fine," Sophia waved him off, though her hand trembled as she pressed the button for the executive floor. "Just tired. This deal has been exhausting." "Sophia, I said I'm fine, Daniel." But she wasn't fine. 3 hours later, during a video conference with Tokyo, Sophia collapsed. Daniel was through her office door before her assistant could scream. Sophia was on the floor, unconscious, her breathing shallow and rapid. He checked her pulse, racing but irregular, and immediately called 911 while simultaneously performing the medical assessment he'd learned in the army. "Stay with me," Daniel commanded, his voice steady despite the terror coursing through his veins. "Sophia, stay with me. I just found you. You don't get to leave now." At Boston General, the same hospital where she'd been born 25 years earlier, doctors ran tests while Daniel paced the waiting room like a caged animal. The irony of the location wasn't lost on him. She'd come into the world here, and now he was terrified she might leave it in the same place. Doctor. Sarah Chen, a cardiologist, emerged 6 hours later with news that changed everything. "Your daughter has a congenital heart condition," Dr. Chen explained, her expression grave but not hopeless. "Long QT syndrome. It's genetic, passed from parent to child. The stress she's been under triggered an episode. She's stable now, but she needs treatment, medication, lifestyle changes, and possibly a defibrillator." "Genetic," Daniel repeated, the word hitting him like a punch. "I gave her this." "It's not about blame, Mr. Rodriguez-Cross," Dr. Chen replied gently. "It's about knowledge. Has anyone in your family had heart problems?" Daniel thought back to his own father, who died of a heart attack at 45. His grandmother, dead from sudden cardiac arrest at 52. A pattern he'd never connected until this moment. "Yes," he whispered, the guilt crushing. "Yes, there's a history." When Sophia woke up, groggy and confused, Daniel was at her bedside, holding her hand with a grip that bordered on desperate. "You scared me," he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "I scared myself," Sophia murmured, then noticed the monitoring equipment surrounding her. "What happened?" Daniel explained about the diagnosis, watched her process the information with that analytical mind that never stopped working, even in crisis. "So I inherited this from you?" she asked, and Daniel braced himself for accusation or anger. Instead, Sophia squeezed his hand. "At least now we know. At least now we can treat it." "I'm sorry," Daniel choked out. "I'm so sorry I gave you this." "Stop," Sophia interrupted firmly. "You gave me life, Daniel. You gave me this stubborn survivor instinct that kept me going when I had nothing. One faulty gene doesn't erase that." But the health crisis brought unexpected consequences beyond the medical. News of Sophia's collapse spread through the business community, and within days, Lawrence Hart, the board member who'd tried to blackmail her, saw an opportunity. He scheduled an emergency board meeting while Sophia was still in the hospital, arguing that she was medically unfit to lead and should be removed as CEO. The vote was scheduled for the following week. "They can't do this," Sophia raged from her hospital bed when Daniel told her. "I've built this company from nothing. One health episode doesn't make me incompetent." "Then we'll fight it," Daniel responded with quiet determination. What happened next would become legend in Boston's business circles. With Sophia confined to the hospital, Daniel became her proxy warrior. He reached out to contacts he'd made through 20 years of security work: journalists, lawyers, investigators. Within 72 hours, he'd compiled a dossier on Lawrence Hart, that would make any boardroom villain sweat. Hart had been embezzling company funds through shell corporations. He'd leaked proprietary information to competitors. And most damning of all, he'd orchestrated the original security threats against Sophia to destabilize her position so he could orchestrate a takeover. The evidence was ironclad, gathered partly through Daniel's investigations and partly through assistance from an unexpected ally, Sophia's head of IT security, who'd been quietly monitoring suspicious activity for months. On the morning of the emergency board meeting, Daniel arrived at the Winters Tech headquarters in his best suit, carrying a briefcase full of documents that would destroy Lawrence Hart's career. Sophia, released from the hospital the day before against doctor's orders, sat in the boardroom with a defibrillator under her blouse and fire in her eyes. When Hart called the meeting to order and began his motion to remove Sophia as CEO, she interrupted him with a voice cold enough to freeze blood. "Before we proceed with that vote, I have something to share with the board." She nodded to Daniel, who distributed the dossiers. As board members paged through the evidence, Hart's face went from red to white to grey. "You're finished, Lawrence," Sophia declared, standing despite Daniel's worried glance. "Not only are you removed from this board, but I'm turning this evidence over to the SEC and the US Attorney's Office. You tried to destroy me because you couldn't control me. But I survived worse than you when I was 12 years old and had nothing. You never stood a chance." Hart was escorted from the building by security, ironically, men who'd been trained by Daniel. The board voted unanimously to keep Sophia as CEO and to implement stronger oversight measures to prevent future corruption. As they left the building that afternoon, Sophia stumbled with exhaustion. Daniel caught her. He was always catching her, it seemed, and this time she let him support her full weight. "We make a good team," she murmured. "The best," Daniel agreed. The winter following Sophia's health crisis was one of rebuilding and healing. She adjusted to her medication, made lifestyle changes that didn't come easily to a workaholic billionaire, and learned to delegate in ways she never had before. Daniel was there through all of it, driving her to cardiology appointments, researching low-sodium recipes she actually enjoyed, reminding her gently when she tried to work 18-hour days. "You're hovering," Sophia complained one evening when Daniel arrived at her apartment with dinner and found her at her laptop. "I'm protecting," Daniel corrected, unplugging her computer. "Eat first, work later." "Bossy." "Protective father of a stubborn daughter," Daniel shot back with a smile. "Now eat your salmon before I ground you." Sophia laughed, genuinely laughed, and Daniel realized it was a sound he'd heard more often in recent months. The walls she'd built around herself for so long were truly coming down. On Valentine's Day, 18 months after the hospital scare, Sophia surprised Daniel with an unusual request. "I want to go back to Boston General," she announced over their Sunday dinner. "Why? Are you feeling okay?" Daniel asked immediately, concern flooding his features. "I'm fine," Sophia reassured him quickly. "I want to go back because that's where it all started, where Grace Elena Rodriguez was born, where you held me for the first time. I've been thinking about it, and I want to see the maternity ward. I want to stand in the place where our story began." They went the following week, and the hospital staff, who remembered Sophia's dramatic admission months earlier, were accommodating. They couldn't access the exact room. It had been renovated several times over the decades, but they stood in the maternity ward, surrounded by the sounds of new life beginning, and Sophia placed her hand over Daniel's heart. "Thank you," she whispered, "for never stopping, for searching for 25 years, for recognizing a birthmark and having the courage to tell me the truth." "Thank you," Daniel replied, covering her hand with his own, "for being brave enough to let me in, for giving me a second chance at being your father." When the legal name change finally came through, nearly 2 years after Sophia had first proposed it, they celebrated quietly. Just the two of them, take-out Chinese food in Sophia's apartment, examining the official documents that declared them legally father and daughter, united by the name Rodriguez. 25 years, Sophia murmured softly, running her fingers over her new identification card. Sophia Elena Rodriguez Winters. "It took 25 years, but I finally have a family." You always had a family, Daniel corrected gently, emotion thick in his voice. You just didn't know where to find it. Sophia lifted her eyes to meet his, those eyes that held Emma's shape, but Daniel's determination, her own unique strength forged through years of surviving alone. I found it now, she whispered simply, her voice carrying the weight of 25 years of loneliness finally ending. That's what matters. And Daniel, looking at his brilliant, strong, incredible daughter, the baby he'd held for 3 days, the child he'd searched for through decades of heartbreak, the woman who'd forgiven him for losing her, could only agree. They'd lost so much time, but what they'd found, what they'd built together from ashes and birthmarks and impossible coincidences, was worth every year of searching, every moment of grief, every second of hope that had kept him going. He'd found his grace, and she'd found her father. Finally, they were both home. What do you think? Did Daniel make the right decision to tell Sophia the truth? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with all our stories. And make sure to check out more powerful and emotional stories by clicking here on the end screen. Thank you for being part of this journey with us.